Another kind of method we might want to add is called a type method. So far we've used instance methods. And an instance method operates under the assumption that you're working on a specific instance of the given struct. And that means that inside that method, we can always refer to members just by their name only. For instance, here inside the member method is an adult. Age is assumed to be referring to the particular instance that we're dealing with. And this is true of all instance methods. But what if you wanted to write a method that involved two or more different instances? Say it compares some attribute between them. For these and other utility type functions, we turn to type methods. And so let's say we wanted to create a method that just says, is patient A older than patient B? Okay. In fact, let's do one where the older one is returned. So we can say something like static func get older. And now we pass in patient A, patient A and patient B, and we return a patient. So the idea is whichever one is older is when we want to return. So to do that, all we have to do is look at the ages. So if A age is greater than B age, we want to return A. Otherwise, we return B. Okay? And notice the difference between this type method and the instance method above it. In this type method case, not only do we have the static added to the front, which tells Swift that this is a type method, not an instance method, but also we're passing in the patient objects that we're dealing with. Why? Well, because in a type method, there is no instance that we are by default referring to. Again, in the instance method case, by default, we're referring to a specific patient. Whereas in the type method case, we are not referring to any patient object by default. And this can be borne out by the way we call these two different methods. Okay, the difference of this. So the difference in the way we call it is, whereas P is an adult, is how you would call the instance method, right? The idea is you're referring to a particular object or particular instance first, and then you're calling the instance method for that instance, okay? Well, that's how Swift knows which instance you're trying to refer to by default. In a type method case, we instead rely on the type name. And so now you see autocomplete recognizes, aha, we must be looking for some sort of type method instead. So get older shows up. And so for this, we actually want to pass in the two values. And so look at the error that shows up here. I've passed in P1 and P2 just to compare them. So let me get rid of this because it's confusing. But let's say we want to see which one's older. Between any two given patients. Well, it turns out this A is not necessary because when you have, in general, when you use methods, you actually don't need to pass in the parameter name for the very first one. Okay. So between P1 and P2, what did we have? We had Jack Smith, who's 19, and Johnny Good, who's 40. Johnny Good should be older, and indeed, he is older. He's the one that's printed. If we were to compare Helen and Johnny, we should get something very similar. Indeed. And just to be safe, Helen and Jack. Helen wins. Okay, so that's the difference between a type method and an instance method.